evening we'll go around the village with the help of photographs, which Janice has very kindly done for us. So it will help us to focus on the area we're talking about. We haven't photographed every location, but they will remind us of the area that we are talking about and the businesses that existed as far back as we can recall. My research has been with the aid of some old photographs and some memories of some of the folk who have lived in the village for over 80 years. So feel free to have an input if it's relevant, because I may not have it all correct. On the display boards there are some old photographs and some letterheads from some of the old businesses. And take time to have a look at those because some of them are really interesting. We'll start with Birch Lane. The two houses there were the coal yard, which was established in 1921 by Mr. E. Meekins. This was where you could buy your coal and your coke and your coal light and your anthracite and whatever. Later on, I think Moyes were the next people to run this coal yard, then Porter and Hughes, and then Colin Porter and his sons,
C&P, Colin and Barbara.
Colin and Barbara, all right. I don't know if anybody else has any comments on the coal yard or any other information. I did speak to Colin briefly today, but right, so we'll...
Ned Meekin, he eventually moved down to Well Lane and lived in Well Lane after he retired.
All right, whereabouts in Well Lane? Remember? Or?
Nearly opposite where Bill Henderson moved.
Exactly, yeah.
Nearly opposite there, one of those houses across the other side of the road.
Oh, okay. Then right at the bottom of Birch Lane, which we don't have a photograph for, was one of the Woodwards had a yard at the bottom of that lane, where I believe they make the coffins, but we might hear more about that later. Right, the next photo is the High Street. We then work our way all the way down the High Street and come back round again. The house with the white house with the blue shutters there was the old bakehouse, which I'm sure you know by now belonged to the Cotty family. One interesting point, I noticed on some of the old photographs that I've been researching that the High Street was called Church Street. Way back when. Do you want to say anything about Cotty family?
Yes, great-granddad moved to that property, I think in the 1840s. He came from East Hanningfield. In those days it was 3 cottages. He converted 2 into 1 to make a shop and start a cottage, and started the bakery up then. Grandad took it over and locked the other cottages, so he made it one property. And he carried on till 1953. He died in 1953. Personally, I can't remember much about it. I was only 3 when he died, so I can't remember much about the bakery itself. But by all accounts, it was all very good bread. Everyone liked the bread, and my Uncle Sam and my Uncle Bill used to make the bread and the cakes. The tale is that Sam used to deliver the bread around the village. But he was a great cricketer. Nothing would stop him playing cricket on a Saturday afternoon. So if he hadn't finished his bread round by the time cricket happened, he played cricket, and people would leave their back doors open. So after cricket, he would continue his round. If people was on the bed, he'd just drop in and put the bread on the back door on the thing. And that was it. So I think Stuart McIntyre lives there now, and I think that one of the original ovens is still in the lounge.
Right, this is a bit further down the High Street. We'll go back in a minute, but this is Swan, as we know, it's Swan Cottage. And that was where our first post office was. It was called the Post and Telegraph Office, and I guess that was where a lot of telegrams came from for those that lived in the village for relatives when, you know, their nearest and dearest had been killed in the war. The lady that, I'm not sure if it's the lady that ran the post office, but there was a lady there at one stage. She actually kept the key, because on the green opposite, on the village green, was a pump, a water pump. And she kept the key, which you obviously had to go and fetch from her so you could unlock the pump to get your water. I don't know of any names of anybody that ran that post office. Yeah?
I think it was a Mrs. Calloway.
Oh, Calloway, yeah, that rings a bell now, yeah.
Well, I think it was a rather formidable character.
All right. Go back now a bit to what we know or knew as the post office. Telephone number being 880. All the shops in the village had just 2 numbers initially for their telephone numbers. And this, as far as I can remember, was run by Mrs. Barker Senior, and then later on was taken over by Gordon and Jean Barker. I don't know if any of you have memories of, you used to go in the white door there, and there'd be the post office counter on your left, a sweet counter straight ahead with loads of jars of sweets on it. And then gradually they opened up all the rooms through the house. It seemed like every year they opened up another room and decided there was something else they could sell. We started off with sort of stationery goods, maybe because Gordon did a lot of printing. In fact, some of the notices on the board over there were all printed by Gordon. And then later on she added, or Jean must have added, gifts, and we had wool and all sorts of things you could buy there. It was like little buttons, yeah. It was like a little Aladdin's cave as you walked through. They gradually opened all their front rooms in the house.
In the back of that shop, there's a baker's oven. So
Yeah.
at some stage, they must have been baking bread there.
Really? Oh,
It's still there now.
Didn't know that. Wow.
Gordon's father was a very keen entomologist,
Right.
and he had a great collection of moths and butterflies. And as a kid, I was fascinated by it. So any time I found a caterpillar or anything, to Mr. Barker, can you tell me what this is? And he used to go round the hedgerows with a sort of a black sort of cloth thing, and it was a walking stick, going like this, tapping the bushes to get caterpillars to drop into it, so that he could identify them. But he had a terrific collection, all in drawers, all properly mounted.
Yeah, I can tell you what happened to that too. Guy stayed with us for a little while in the late 50s, who was opening the Natural History Museum at Colchester. And Gordon Barker gave it to him for the Natural History Museum.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So I didn't get chucked away then.
Also, Gordon Barker used to be the only place to buy fireworks in my younger days. Yes, we used to buy penny bangers and tuppeny bangers if they're really big ones.
And he used to sort the mail round the back too at Christmas. So it was doing the old Christmas post round.
Right.
Had to go down the side path and in the back door.
Yeah. Right, now we're down to our current post office, but this was just a Drapers and grocery shop many years ago, and I've got a list of people that have run this shop over the years. I've got Howard, Moore, Tuffield, Suitors, Harvey's, Sales, Randall, and now Leslie and Sarge. So with all those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people that have been there. My memories only go back as far as Mrs. Harvey, and at that stage we still had a big wooden staircase up in the middle of the shop with a sort of a gallery round it, yes, where I think that was only used as a store though, wasn't it? I don't think.
He opened a Christmas store.
Yeah, the Christmas special something.
Yeah.
I remember it as Suitors as a child.
Yeah.
Valuable as well, and on the left hand side was all the drapery counter, on the right hand side was all the grocery.
Yeah. You'll see an advert over there where they advertise you can have your eiderdown recovered for some very small fee. Yes, they sold lots of material and what have we as well then. Right, this we know is Stafford House. which is just on the corner of the square. The piece we're sort of going to talk about is the piece just on the very end here, where it's Mrs. Howe's sweet shop and tea room. Now, as children, we were allowed to go round to there to buy our sweets on the main road. No fear of getting knocked over. My memories of her shop, as I can remember as a very small child, the counter was very high. And it always worried me how I was going to actually manage to pay her. I couldn't just stand on tiptoe, because on the counter she had sweet jars, so you had to get right over the top to hand her the money. And a block of Neapolitan ice cream comes to mind as well. That's I don't know if anybody else has got any memories
Mr.
of...
Parnell apparently ran that prior to Mrs. Howe's.
Sorry, Miss
Mr. Parnell.
Parnell, right.
That shop. One time apparently.
I can remember going there as a young lad and buying 4 Dominoes, which were small cigarettes. And also jamboree bags, I think.
Oh yes,
I remember.
yeah. Right, the one we're talking about here is the pink one right at the end, and that was another sweet shop, and that was Mrs. Eve's. She sold sweets, and it was a general store as well, and I think during the wartime she did quite a bit with ration food. You could take your ration books in there and see what she could offer you. Any memories on that? No?
I can just about remember it.
Actually, it's always back to the old Gordon Barker's motor. That actually became an antique shop for a little while, didn't it?
Oh yes, yes. Yeah, you're right now, yeah. Right, now we're a bit further up the high street, and this was Hugh Wright's Butchers. Hugh Wright and Son are butchers, and also they slaughtered out in the back there somewhere. I believe Mr. Thorogood ran it for a little while. And we know that Ron Fuel and his father worked there, and Jim Oakley worked there for a little while. I don't know if any of these names ring a bell with anybody, but and I'm not sure, unless anybody can help me out here, quite what happened after that. Did it become the antique shop after a while?
Yes.
Was there anything happened in the intervening period? I did.
I used to do the butchers around the bike.
Sorry?
I used to do the butchers around the bike.
On a bike. Yeah.
Actually, one thing that came up the other day when we were with Alan's son-in-law, who was an office there, he pointed out that, unfortunately I didn't get it in the photo, but he pointed out that if you look at the bricks, at the corner of the building, as it goes down to Back Lane, all the bricks are like slots, there's gaps, and that was the smokehouse. I've never even noticed it until he pointed it out. I think he said they weren't allowed to change them.
That was part of the planning.
Yes, because
My aunt worked in the office there for years. She did the sort of bookwork, did the bills when I was at school. And Fred, Bill and Ron were working in there.
Yeah.
There's a little office, like a little office at the back. I remember the old pedestal telephone.
But if you go in there now, having survived the art gallery, the florist,
I'm going to say, yeah, I've got a list of things. Baby clothes.
you'll find that the butcher's rails are still in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, this is what we knew as Mrs. Cable's house, or from Mrs. Cable's house. On the left-hand side of the house, there used to be a single-storey sort of lean-to on the end there, and I've been told that that was used as a hairdresser's. And it's later on, Elf, because he had kept chickens down in the back in the old sort of Nissen hut that they had in the garden, and from that building he sold eggs later on. But again, we haven't got a name for anybody that actually worked in the hairdressers, but I'm not sure if it was full time. It might just have been, you know, odd days. A name has been mentioned to be in this area. We're not quite sure where she fits in. It was a Miss Tollfree. Now, I don't know if that rings a bell with anybody, but she sold bread and made homemade pies. Now, it could have been, again, in part of that house, or it could have been, this side next door was 2 blackboarded cottages. Now, whether she lived in one of those, we're not 100% certain, but that came from a reliable source. This is just opposite. You can see that where the bricks came, that has been built on, but before that, again, there was a single story piece on the end of that house. And this again was a butcher's. It was quite a small butcher's, I understand, and we believe they specialised in something. We're not sure what. we've ruled it down to either a pork butcher's or they sold game. Is that anybody? No, you don't know. So that remains a little bit of a mystery. There is I don't think I brought it tonight, but I have found a photograph. It may be up on the board. And there is a board outside that house, but we haven't been able to magnify it enough to see what the board says. Right, this is the brick house, which again is just opposite Christchurch. Anybody know who ran a business in here?
Was it Mr. Smith?
Yeah, Melvin Smith.
Yeah.
He was according to his letter heading, he was a nurseryman, florist and gardener. And I understand at the time you could cut through his garden. This is apparently what a lot of the children did when they came home from school, was go through his garden because you could get right through to Back Lane before houses were built on all the back gardens. So the children would often use that as a cut through if they lived at the top end of Back Lane, which I don't think he was too happy about. But in his garden he had 2 large walnut trees. And he used to collect the walnuts so you could buy fresh walnuts from him. And he wore another hat as well. He was the ARP warden for the village. And apparently when he put his hat on, he was a very different character. Yeah. Right, now we're going up Mill Road. This is what's called Sadler's, and this was Mr. Upson's. He was a saddler and an ironmonger. He also ran it as a cycle shop, specialising in BSAs and rally bicycles. There was something that he did quite frequently. He used to hang a notice on the shop door, back in 10 minutes. Of course, you never knew what time he'd left, but that was his lunch break at one of the pubs, I think.
He always had a half cigarette hanging in his mouth.
Yeah.
Always.
In the winter, there's always an open fire burning in there too. That's right. In there. See that chimney, the chimney stack on the left there?
Yeah.
Well, as you went into the door on the left, there was always an open fire going in there, and the counter was on the other side.
No.
He used to sell shoes as well.
Yeah.
His telephone number was 44. Anybody remembers it? It was later on that we went to 3 numbers, because I can remember as a child our home number was 321, so we obviously moved on a bit. Now, I can remember Mr. and Mrs. Hutchins being there.
Yes.
I can then remember it being called Lock, Stock and Barrel, which was Dave and Ivy Sharman. Sharman, yeah? Robertson was there. I thought their name was Robinson's, and then I changed it to Hutchins. Was there Robinson there as well? Robertson.
There was a Hutchins. Yeah, there was a Hutchins. But I think Robertson as well.
Definitely Hutchins.
Yeah. But again, you could buy nearly everything there. You could buy paraffin, you know, bit of DIY stuff, a bit of whatever, soap houses. It seemed to be another general stores.
Arkwright, perhaps?
Right, here we are at the Four Vintners. Now there is a very interesting photograph we've come to hand recently over there, which Mark at the Vintners has passed on, which has been copied. And this shows Mr. and Mrs. Watson outside the shop, because later on Miss Nellie Watson took over, and then after that Bert Weston had it. And again, you know, it's a general grocery stores selling everything. And the little cottage just next door, which has now got the sort of bay window in it, there Mr. and Mrs. Lancaster lived. And Mr. Lancaster would always repair your watch or your clock. I mean, he only did it as a part-time job. But you could drop your watch round to him and collect it a couple of days later or whatever, and he would repair it for you. The next one is what I know is the Crispin. That was, I think that's because he's patron saint of shoemakers or something. That was first run by Mr. Buck, who was a bootmaker and repairer. Later on, it became the Bosco family's home, where he also made handmade shoes. And then I think it sold some riding equipment. Yes. And then it became the Little House. So it was Mr. Buck, then Mr. Bosco, and then it became, I think, had riding equipment or something. I always remember when it was called the Little House, the lady there actually put quite large lettering, just plain white lettering, but they were all single letters over the top of the shop, and parish council didn't like it. Apparently the lettering was too big, so she really didn't stay terribly long.
I just wondered if you knew, or you could tell us, when the businesses stopped and they became homes rather than, you know, just to give us some idea of the time scale?
Yeah, I'm not certain on all of them. I mean, most of them have carried on in some way, but I might better finger in a bit more on this one, because this is home for me. My father bought this premises. Well, he rented it first off. He did an apprenticeship with J. Sainsbury up in Enfield in London. He didn't really want to be a butcher, he wanted to be a vet. But he was one of 6 boys, and his parents couldn't afford for him to go and do the training, so he went off to Sainsbury's to do an apprenticeship, and quite like butchery at the end of the day. And his family lived in Latchington, and he was looking for a business, and this one was on the market, and it was owned then by Mr. Patton from Ranston Heath, John Patton, and he offered it to my father, and to begin with, my dad rented it, and it was advertised as a shop and a house with 4 bedrooms, a bathroom, gas, water, electric, and the rent was £75 a year. This is in 1938. Sorry. After a couple of 3 years, my father was called up and he went into the RAF, so he went off to India. And in the meantime, he left an elderly uncle running the business. I gather my dad's uncle, my great uncle, did his best, but my father was getting very concerned because I think he could see the business, well, couldn't see, he wasn't here, but had letters from the family to say his business was deteriorating. So when he came back home, he really had a job to sort of pull everything together again. So he bought the business in 1949 and expanded it. They started doing lots of cold meats and pies and brawn and all sorts of things. He got a licence to sell game. He decided to open a fish shop next, which started its life as a stable. And he got permission to change it, and that was in the early 50s, into a fish shop, and prior to that, when meat was on ration, you'll see on one of the adverts over there, when meat was on ration and very hard to get, he started to have fish in the butcher shop to try and help people out with food. And then in the early 50s, what is Pampers Locks, which was our sitting room, became the greengrocers. And he leased that to Peter Wallace, who lives in West Hanningfield. And I think that was on about a 14-year lease, so that stayed as a greengrocers for quite some time until we took it back again. And I did my floristry from there.
There's no business like veg business.
Stuart the hairdresser swaps the clippers for the keyboard. Jim Cotty, flowing and bearded for the stage, is the shop's owner, rehearsing a vegetarian speciality with brother Phil and Ken Cooper.
You're broken-hearted, but you go on. There's no people like veg people, they just run out of dough. Shoppers come from everywhere with lots of jack, and when they lose it, there's no attack. Where could you buy produce that you won't take back? Let's go on with the show. Let's go on with the show.
The property, strange enough, was called Lawn House. Not quite sure where the lawn was, but we had a patch of grass out the back, but I think to call it a lawn was stretching it a little bit. And then my father started making lots of homemade sausages and selling them wholesale. The fish shop was then taken over by Mervyn Clark, who worked for my father. He ran it. And then Hepburn's bought the premises. And then John Carter ran the butchers for a while. And I think it was in 1993 that some of the shopkeepers decided to get up a campaign because they were really starting to struggle. And they had a campaign, I don't know if many of you can remember it, but it was called Use It or Lose It.
Bruce Sellers had something to do with that.
Sorry?
Bruce Sellers had something to do with that.
Did you? Oh, right. But then in the yard at the back there, we had some other businesses going on. Elf Offord had rented a shed, and that's where you had your hair cut. And then Bob Passion had rented another shed, and that's where you could get your mower repaired. I think after Mervyn had the fish shop, we had then Jeffrey's fish shop for a while, and then it became the Indian takeaway.
Roger Swift as well.
Roger
Swift
had it for
yeah.
a while, yes. Next door but two, after Pottery House, where now is the entrance to Bakersfield, that was Elliott's Builders Yard, where the Elliott brothers ran their business. On the right, where the pond is, up Mill Road, on the right hand side, well, we call it the Hop It, I don't know what Ben calls it. There was, where Ben now lives, there was Mr. Raisin's television and wireless repairs. He ran that in a shed from his garden. I understand Mr. Raisin worked for Marconi's in his younger days and was, quite important there. And then you just took your wireless, or if you wanted your telly repaired, you gave him a nudge and he would come round and put a new tube in it, as we had in those days. Right, this is where Cable's Builders Yard was. Again, they had a shop, which was a DIY shop, and I think before that may have been a Mr. Alexander ran something from that yard. I don't know if any of you remember Cable's shop, where Sam worked with his brown smock on. That's your house, is it?
Yeah. Was it a builder's yard? Many years ago.
Yes.
Not that many.
I remember when it was cables, you wanted to buy sand there. You turn up with your trailer and say, can I have half a yard of sand? And he'd say, yes, 18 shovelfuls. That's the biggest shovel I could find.
He also used to rent out his cement mixer and stuff like that as well.
Right, yeah.
Um,
I think they might have been an agent for Dulux Paint. They
I think they
used to
were.
sell an awful lot of Dulux Paint. Yeah.
Used to back onto our house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you remember? You can't remember Mr. Alexander, have you?
No, I remember Sam used to spend most evenings around our house because he was on his own. Yeah.
Right, this is opposite, and you can see that the right-hand piece has been built on, but before that, Mr. Souls had this as his newsagent. That's before he moved down into the square. A bit further along on that side of the road where there's some houses. Mr. Curtis ran his builders and carpentry business. That's, for those of you who don't know, that was Gwen Griffiths.
Tom,
Yeah, it's Gwen Griffiths' dad.
Gwen Griffiths.
Yeah, he was a builder and carpenter. Right, this one was Mrs. Deering's grocer's shop. Did we mention the cat?
You must.
Mrs. Deering was well known for having her cat that sat on the counter beside the bacon slicer. She sold quite a lot of paraffin. So chances were the customer before might have bought a gallon of paraffin and then she'd serve you with some ham or bacon with the cat watching on.
She got very upset when she was stopped from selling the paraffin.
Was she?
Because she said Charlie Palmer could sell sweets and sell petrol. Why didn't she sell
Get a paraffin. This later became the Stockpot restaurant.
Just between there and Common Road was part of George Webster's nursery.
Nurseries, yeah. I had got Webster's nurseries down. Right, and then this plot right on the corner of Well Lane was where we had the garage, which was sort of set up about 1939, I think 39 to 52. The Searles had it, and they sold petrol and had it as a stores.
Now, the Searles actually owned the property, but my father ran the business.
Oh, right.
Name of Sergeant.
Yeah.
The Searles that own the newsagent that you mentioned, they actually own the property,
Oh, right.
the garage, and the cottages alongside it.
Right. Then where does Mr. Mather, or the two Mathers, fit in? We've got a letter heading. Oh no, I don't think I brought it up, did I?
No, my father's heading is there.
Yeah. And then we found another one that said Mr. Mather. There was two initials, and they also ran the garage.
Yeah, there were two guys running for a while, I remember, yeah.
I'm not quite sure where they fit in.
That might have been after Charlie Palmer. My father sold it to Charlie Palmer, although Charlie Palmer didn't own it, he was the manager there.
Right.
So I've just learned.
I play football and stuff, and Charlie Palmer was come as a linesman only because he owned a dorm bill which we all fit into. One day he had a big punch up with the referee and he was banned for life from the Constitutional District.
Well, I think the Sergeant family, they ran a taxi business in there as well, didn't they?
Yeah, we did, yeah. Taxis which went on to the Billericay station and Chelmsford. And my father had two coaches as well.
Yeah.
He certainly did, yeah.
Jim Sargent sent me a whole load of memories of the website as well, so there's a lot on there about it.
Oh, is there? Right.
Yeah.
That was my older brother, unfortunately he passed away.
I heard, yeah.
I can remember in Charlie Palmer's day, you could have a monthly account for your petrol. I don't think as many garages will let you do that nowadays, but And I also can remember the monkey tree.
And the only.
That apparently was planted by Mr. Voice, Senior. And yeah, that was there for ages. Well, till the houses were built, I guess. Till those houses there.
You could also go and buy fish out of his freezer.
Oh,
We had a freezer
yeah.
at the garage, and we were never quite sure where the fish came from. It was usually trout. So the reservoir was probably the reservoir.
The monkey tree actually had a preservation order, and that was stopping the houses being built, but unfortunately it died.
Right, now we're down in the square. Just before I go on to that, actually, I'll mention the Webster's nursery, and then there was Downwell Lane. Further down there was Haywood Brown's father, I think, and sold fruit and veg, which Haywood carried on. Then there was Mr. Henderson further down the lane, who was a plumber. And then right down the bottom onto Swellgains, we had the two, still have, but they were there then, the two Harnett nurseries, the two brothers. Right, onto the square, where we had on the left really, was the accumulator shop.
There was, my father run that.
Yeah?
I don't know whether he started it, and my nan at the time lived with us, and she used to be in charge of it. And as far as I remember, well, they did accumulators because we did those from the garage.
Right.
And Mum used to deliver them every Friday all round the houses. But as far as I remember, there was electrical goods in the shop and a hairdresser's above.
Yes, now was it a gentleman's hairdressers?
Yeah, they probably did, yeah.
No, I thought that was, I saw the gentleman's hairdressers after the blacksmith's closed.
Yes, but there was one before that, and I think it was upstairs, above the accumulator shop. Somebody mentioned the name to me, but I haven't written it down. Well, I can remember a Miss Stone working in the accumulator shop. She was quite a large lady, quite tall and.
Yeah, it was possibly after my father got rid of it, I think.
Yeah.
Well, did the Squires run it as well? Mr. and Mrs. Squires?
I don't know whether that was all that radio, didn't they come into it?
That's the one I
whether
remember.
it's Squires or Aldex, I think Aldex took it on, I think, at a later date.
Somebody's mentioned to me Mr. Speakman. Now, could he have been the hairdresser, or was he connected with the shop?
I remember the name.
Somebody called Shirley Gowan.
Did for a little while, yeah. Then it became the Stripes hairdressers. Peggy started off with her two daughters running it, and then later on when Bob retired from the farm, he took on the next bit downstairs there, and he ran the gents hairdressers. And then next door was the forge.
That building with the top, that was the blacksmith's. I can distinctly remember it. That was definitely the blacksmith.
I used to take my horse there, and he used to charge me £10 to shoe it. Today it's over £70.
Yes, I can remember going in there and watching Mr. Brown because he lived next door to us. He lived in the cottage just across the road. And I used to play with Peggy's two daughters, Sylvia and Janet. So we often played in Mrs. Brown's back garden and had great fun. She had an outdoor shed with it was her bathroom. And we as children had great fun in there. She used to let us sing songs and do all sorts of things.
Yeah, there's a couple of things, because Brown's used to keep the bear across the road, but he was also kept the blacksmiths, and he was also the parcels agent for the Eastern National Bus Company, which is
the bus stop was outside.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Yeah, there used to be a bus stop. We've just chatted about this earlier on this evening. There used to be a bus stop outside the hairdressers there, and the timetable was
on the opposite side.
Outside the bear.
Yes.
That later became Stewart's Hairdressers. Right, this is our newsagents. If you go into the library, stock library, you know, it's at the school, and ask if you can have a look at the heritage photograph box, which is kept there. There's a really interesting photograph of this area, and it was a pair of blackboarded cottages all the way along there years ago. So if you want to go and ask, you obviously have to view the photographs in the library, but I think later on they will be housed in the new Heritage Centre, but it's worth having a look at them. This, I think I can go back as far as Freddie Searles, moved down from Mill Road to here, and he sold leather goods, fancy goods, toys. I assume he sold newspapers, as I said. Then I can remember Mr. and Mrs. Simpson,
Yeah.
Mr. and Mrs. Parker, Mr. and Mrs. Elliott, Mr. and Mrs. Porter. Sarah Lewis ran it for a while as a tea room as well. Don't know, any others?
It gradually extended, didn't it?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, it's moved it back.
Yeah. Yes, because Morris and Wendy had a sitting room behind there, didn't they?
Yeah, and they had a storeroom behind the shop.
Yeah. This is Mr. Bishop's office, which was Woodward's Builder's Yard.
My great-grandfather came to Stockton about 1891, actually to the almshouses. Now by 2001 he lived in Chestnuts there, and can I say 1901 the High Street, which is wasn't the High Street stock, it was High Street Butsbury. And he started doing the Undertaking, and I've got an article here which was by the late Don Jarvis regarding great-grandfather. It says, when a death in the village occurred, often the first intimation of this would be a tap-tapping or a light hammering coming from the workshop of Mr. Woodward of the Chestnuts. Mr. Woodward was a builder, but perhaps better known as the village undertaker, and the unmistakable sound of hammering as he fashioned a coffin would cause immediate speculation as to which local resident had died. This was days when Stock was a very quiet village, a bit like now really, before the days of thumping road traffic, when sounds such as hammering could be carried throughout the village. Residents of Stock would not have dreamt of having a coffin made outside the village. Mr. Woodward made the coffin and also conducted the funeral processions, which were usually made on foot, with the coffin on a large wheeled hand bier pushed by one or two of the bearers, with Mr. Woodward himself in top hat leading the procession. Actually, just before, when Dick Weston left the bear, he used to drink occasionally in the Baker's Arms, and just before he died, he said to me that he knew that the hand bier was still in the village somewhere, but he didn't know. He said, I will tell you soon, but unfortunately he died, so I've never found out where the hand bier is. Mr. Woodward also had other talents. He was an expert woodcarver, as well as being a church organist, walking to St Mary Butsbury every Sunday. The 1914-80 War Memorial in the church is an example of his work, the unveiling having taken place in September 1920. As a builder, he also carried out many repairs to the church and discovered and opened up one window which had been bricked up for many years. He is interred in Butsbury Churchyard. His wife worshipped in the Congregational Church. But then my grandfather married an Irish woman from Killarney. She was a school teacher at the church. So after that we all became Roman Catholics.
Yes, perhaps we'll just talk for a few minutes about Fred Makin's and later on Michael Makin's dairy business down Back Claim. I remember them having the three-wheeled milk floats, which had to be plugged in every night to be recharged.
They had a little old petrol one at one time, a Reliant, that used to pop all around the village.
And one of the ladies that I went to see recently remembered that one evening the shed where they were being recharged caught fire. And she said she was just putting her girls to bed and wondered what all the commotion was, so they carried them down the road to have a look and stood them on at the end of back lane, at the end of the houses, just before the dairy. There used to be a big like wrought iron stand, and they stood the children on there so they could see what was going on. And I don't know, those of you remember PC Plunkett? Came racing down back lane on his bicycle with his cape flowing, ringing his bell and asking everybody to move out of the way. And as he went to turn into the dairy on the right hand side, he fell off his bicycle into the hedge, which obviously caused great amusement. They weren't quite sure what he was going to do, one man on a bike with a fire blazing, but and then the Strike family also ran a dairy business from Farrer's Farm, which is the house just opposite the junction to Downham Road.
Could I just interrupt you a minute? When I was a kid, I worked for Michael and his father, and it was a horse and trap.
Yeah.
And I was so slow, they called me Lightning.
Bob Stripe, he used to deliver the milk from Stripes on the pony and trap.
Yeah. Then perhaps we could recount for a few seconds the mobile shops that we had in the village as well. I don't know how everybody made a living in these days, I really don't. I think we got up to, I don't know, nearly 30 businesses at least.
Pauline, before you got a mobile, do you remember Mary Wilker's sister used to do the sewing and place shop? Chestnut.
Oh yeah, she lived.
Chestnut.
Yeah, she lived. Mary lived in Butsford Terrace, yes, but her sister lived in.
Yeah, in Chestnuts, I think it's called.
Chestnut, is it? What's the one that actually?
And she opposite the grocery shop.
Yeah.
And she used to do sewing and homemade cakes.
Cakes. Yeah, yeah, I vaguely remember that. Yeah. Mobile shops. We had Mr. Beale's van. He came from Foxford Chase, just before the Ship Pub, and he sold groceries and paraffin again. I can remember the back of his van actually smelt of paraffin. There was a Mr. Cox who came round in a horse and cart and sold fruit and vegetables, and he again was from Foxford Chase. There was Mr. Madle, who had a black and white van and was a carrier. He would take parcels and fetch parcels for you backwards and forwards to Billericay Station. My dad had a mobile butcher's, which covered the outlying areas. One other person that I found quite a lot of his letter headings in the book that we had from Gordon Barker's shop was Mr. Melbourne. He was the beekeeper, he lived in the top of White's Hill. He was quite significant because he would ride round with he rode a bicycle which was like a butcher's bike with a basket on the front, with the carrier that the basket sat in, and didn't matter what the weather, he was in his string vest. Yeah, string vest and shorts. There are other seasonal employers in the village, and the Briley's were down just at the bottom Stock Hills and running their orchards. There was Mr. Lister, who had the black currant fields up on Mill Road. And I'm not sure who was in the farm Frizzling Hall, but I can remember going picking up potatoes there.
Was that the Smiths?
Jack Smith.
Could have been the Smiths, yeah.
Jack.
And then Major Gibbon, who also had an orchard down off of Goatsmoor Lane. Again, you could go apple picking there. Right, well that's all that I've...
Poor merchants usually come round, Pauline. The poor merchant come round, because everybody kept drinks.
Oh yeah, because a lot of we haven't covered the agricultural side of things.
No, nearly everybody kept chickens, so it was a doorstep
Yeah.
to live all through the village.
Right, brilliant.
I don't know if it's the same place that had previously been the apple orchard, but there was also strawberry picking back in the 80s down Goatsmore.
Coastal Lane, yes. Anything else anybody can remember?
I think there was a Mr. Newman used to come around at one time. He was another tracker person. He came from Danbury. Yes. And of course at one time I think he used to have the packing station. He used to take stuff. We used to have chicken because I remember we used to have chickens for time in the 50s and we used to have the eggs at the packing station. He's going back.
Yeah. I think we had a Corona man come round as well.
Yeah, we did. Yeah.
I think there was a carrier actually in stock actually, I think it was just before the war and that it says I've done somewhere.
Yeah, he lived up Mill Road.
Yeah,
just before you get to that farm on the left, two brothers. Opposite Henderson lived, Girl Henderson, used to work for your dad, Agnes.
Yeah.
Opposite there, they used to have horse and carts and do the brilliant station.
Yeah.
Boilers. I
I
can't
think I
remember
found
his name now. He used to
another
work,
advert.
they ended up working for Lisbon in the end.
I think I found another advert for a carrier that lived at Scrivener's Farm or somewhere down one of the farms as well somewhere, but it wasn't anybody that nobody had mentioned them. So.
That could have been Sam Kent.
Kent, that's it, yeah.
Yeah, it was Sam Kent.
That name rings a bell, yeah. Well, I hope you've all enjoyed this evening. It's, I've enjoyed doing the research.
Yeah, also, in the 1920s, my dad always told me that Harrods used to come down on a horse and cart and deliver in the village. And he would build a home where they bought so many pounds of butter and pairs of boots and God knows what. That was Harrods.
You still remember that, please, dear?
I thought it'd start then.
Well, I'd like to conclude the evening by passing both thanks to you, Pauline, especially for all your research and work you've done, and for taking me back to my childhood. I've been very quiet up to now, but I'm on my feet now. And I'd also like to thank Janice for providing these photographs, and also to Paul for his reminiscing. I remember going to your dad many a time, Pauline, with the chickens, trying to sell chickens, and he'd always say, well, they're not worth a lot, are they, Robert? They're pretty thin, aren't they? A little half the feathers are missing. Anyway, I remember your father vividly, and I have very fond memories of him, and he was a lovely man. He really was. And also, I had one more reminisce concerning the blacksmiths. One morning at home, I don't know if any of you here know Rich Hampton. Yes. Well, he worked for us, and 2 cart horses were missing. And Reg and I, being the youngest on the staff, we could hear them going up the road. And my father said, come on you two, you've got to get after those horses. They were going up the road as though there was no tomorrow. And Reg and I were puffing up the road. And we got about halfway up our track, and I could hear them going along the high street, clop, clop, clop. And I said, Reg, we're in trouble now. Anyway, we got onto the high street, moved along towards Billericay, because that was the direction they were going. There was not a sound. Went round into the square. Where had they gone? Over in the blacksmith's. They were so used to going there. Anyway, thank you very much for a very informative evening, and well done.
This is what is known as a fairly cheap evening for the society, because Pauline is not charging a professional fee, but certainly she's attracted a very large audience. So, thank you very much, Pauline. Lovely.